Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Father's Friday. I'm your host, Brian Anderson. Today, I'm joined by Jett Stone. He is a fatherhood friend of mine. We met through a training on how to be better gender equity advocates in our homes through a company called Fair Play. And since then, we've been good friends to kind of ideate on how to be better dads and better, community members in this space. But he is formally trained as a psychotherapist that works with men and dads to help them process a whole host of things. And more importantly, though, he is a dad of two daughters that are quite spirited and amazing, and I've got to meet them once. So, Jett, welcome, and excited to talk with you today.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So, uh, there's a lot of ways you could take your psychology practice and psychotherapy practice. Why men? Why dads? Like, what holds a passion there for you?
Yeah, there are a lot of different directions to take a psychotherapy practice. I ha had the need to go where I felt like I had the highest and best use, where I was needed. And, there's a growing cultural movement of engaged fatherhood, of trying to understand um, boys and men and the struggles that they're having. And I felt, given just my own experience as a boy and becoming a man, the training that I did in the VA, where I worked with a lot of men who face trauma, I built a practice around it. And it's been really fulfilling to help those who probably otherwise wouldn't have gone to psychotherapy go into psychotherapy and help them work through some of the toughest issues of their life and build strong relationships with a whole range of different men. And so it's been my life's work to help understand psychology of men and help bring them into the fold of mental wellness and make therapy a space that is inclusive for men in a way that it probably wasn't uh, for many years. And we're still working on that, but it's been a passion of mine.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love that you're able to, bring that out for men and be a strong role model because I've spoken with many people for this series and otherwise around just the lack of models, right? Like the old models aren't working. And so I'm curious, like, what about the old models don't work and what did work in terms of building a place to jump from and working with dads and men in your practice?
Well, what doesn't work with mental suffering is, you know, keeping it to yourself, quietly suffering.
Sorry,
Mhm.
not to interrupt you. I meant more
Sure.
like the old models of fatherhood and masculinity. Like, how do those older models of what it means to be a man, how are they incomplete or bad for that mental health factor that you're working within? But are there signs that some aspects of it were good and using that as a conversation to build from?
I see what you're saying. I mean, the older model was much more two-dimensional
Hmm.
when it came to, being a provider, being a protector, and the role of a father or the role of a man was largely built around that. And I think one of the things that we can do as leaders in the space, or as in my case, psychologists, psychotherapists, is to help bring in a new conversation about how men can also be emotionally conversant and caretakers. And I think that adding that component makes men, fathers, much more well-rounded,
Sure.
multidimensional. And so my whole thing here is to make men see their three-dimensionality that maybe
Hmm.
was dormant in previous generations and bring life to it
Yeah.
and help them find their internal motivation to be um, not just a good provider, not just sort of the stoic, strong and silent. Those are important too. Those definitely have a role, but also add this other dimension of like, who are you and how can I bring more empathy and um, more relational understanding to the world? How can I bring that into my life? And how does that benefit me? Those are some examples.
No, love it. So, and sorry if my question was misleading, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of just the old models of, breadwinner and being distanced from the family rather than an active member and participant. And with the data we see with trends of dads being at home parents or just being more active in drop-offs, pickups at school, et cetera, like if we don't have those skills to be equipped to handle the emotions that come with just being human, then we're doing everybody a disservice, right? Not just ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that you're weaving that in. I'm just curious, like obviously, like client patient confidentiality and everything. You don't probably share a lot of your personal journey with clients, but how does your work with men inform your own personal experiences as a dad and navigating it? Like, are you taking your own advice, basically?
Um, I try to. Every session that I have with a dad, let's say, there's some part of me, there's some part of my soul that I'm bringing into that conversation, whether I like to admit it or not.
Yep.
And as much as I work to help men reimagine their lives as fathers and sort of break the trends of old to um, make new habits and new behaviors and in their family, I also learn from them as well. Like sometimes I'll have a moment where like, oh my gosh, I go through that too. Like I know exactly what you're talking about. And so as a therapist, you always have to be very cautious about how you bring yourself into the room, whether you self-disclose. And if you do, it has to be very thoughtful and it has to be in service of the persons that you're working with, their goal and their mission.
Yeah.
I think the fact that I am a father and most of my clients know that, I think it helps um, you know, create solidarity and an understanding of like, okay, he gets it. So
Yeah.
I mean, so much to learn because there's so many different family configurations. There's so many
Right.
different
Right.
ways a person could be a father. Um, there are single fathers, there are fathers who aren't married, there are, you know, fathers going through divorce, there are fathers who are happily married, there's breadwinner fathers, there's co-breadwinner fathers, there's stay-at-home dads. I mean, the compilations that you could think of are almost endless.
Yeah.
And so there's so much diversity even when you say the word dad. And
Right.
I see that in my practice. I get to work with a lot of unique people.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, what would you say, like, with the show, we're often talking about like how do we disconnect from that professional identity so we can be more present at home in the evenings and weekends. And I'm just curious, like, are there strategies that you've seen work better with some of your clients or even for yourself to kind of, you know, be more holistic in all the spaces you're in, but really in making sure you're not bringing that stress from work or that emotional like weight into a relationship that doesn't need it or deserve it, right? Because it's a 6-year-old doesn't really care what you had to deal with at work that day. They just want to play Legos or play a card game, right? So yeah, just curious how you strategize around making that break.
It's an important question because the line between work and home has become blurred since the pandemic, where a lot of people do work from home or have more flexible work hours. So I always say, like, impose a boundary between work and home so you can have that reunion when you return home from work and that departure when you leave for
Yeah.
work. Um, that might mean getting a shared workspace if you work from home, if it's in your budget. That might mean like taking a beat or taking a walk before you come home from work. To disconnect more broadly, though, it might sound cliche. I mean, in some way, shape, or form, move your body and have some breathing practice. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a contemplative practice or a meditation practice, but learn how to breathe. Um, Move your body, whether it's throwing around kettlebells or whether it's going for a brisk walk. The other thing that I'll throw in there that you don't hear too often, and I wrote a little bit about this for Psychology Today, is um, reading fiction.
Mm.
I've been sort of on this kick where you know men tend to buy nonfiction books, just that's what the numbers show, and fiction has a way of taking you away and actually giving you relational skills, and some studies even show can help promote empathy, and it gives you language for your own life. And so I guess that's one that you don't hear about too much. I personally play music, so I love piano and guitar, and that's both um, something that's embodied, right? Your
Right.
hands are on the keyboard, your hands are on the guitar, and it's emotional. So there you
Yeah.
have it.
Well, especially with music, if your head's in another space, you're not going to be playing very well and not really like recognizing the chords you're strumming or whatever. So yeah, I love that example. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Hmm.
Uh, but you mentioned writing for Psychology Today. You write a lot as well as read a lot, it sounds like. I'm just curious, like, what are you writing about? I think you told me you have a book coming out, so maybe if you want
Hmm.
to share a little bit about that, yeah, do a little plug.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with the Psychology Today. That's where the book came from.
Sure.
But I have a blog. It's called Souls of Men, and I write about fatherhood. I write about male relationships and the intricacies of male bonding.
Mhm.
I'm trying to make the male psychology come alive for readers,
Yeah.
and just give them a non-jargon sense of like how a psychotherapist works with men, how we think about them. Like I have a recent piece called Nine Actionable Strategies to Help Build Trust with Men. So I think one of the most important things you can do, especially in psychotherapy, is have what we call a therapeutic alliance. And that's just a strong foundation. And so in this age that we're in a very polarized culture, how do you build strong bonds with men, right? Like what are some of the strategies and techniques? And so I have a book out coming out. It's called Quiet Your Mind, a men's guide, and it's an offshoot of some of the things I've written about. But they're just chapters built around different strategies to deal with overthinking, which is
Yeah.
another way of saying worry and rumination.
Sure.
And there's just so many different strategies that we could focus on calming meditation practices, or you could focus on looking at stress and how to de-stress, how to harness stress. We can look at time management strategies. And so I talk all about that. And then another chapter, I'm looking at tools to help you distance yourself from your inner chatter.
Hmm.
And there's so many different cool techniques to do that. So it's not psychotherapy, but I hope for readers it will be a bridge potentially to that.
Yeah. No, I love it. I'm definitely looking forward to it, and we'll make sure information is in the newsletter about when to expect it. But really, also, like, I've loved reading your Psychology Today reflections and action steps and things. So definitely, if you're listening and want to get some therapy light kind of support, definitely could do a lot worse, but not much better. So I highly recommend checking out Jett on that front. Before we get to your dad joke, we'd just love to hear, like, a recent story of when you really excelled as a dad and like connected with your kids. Even if they were embarrassed like crazy, that's okay. Even better, maybe. But yeah, just an example of when you really put all of these practices you're mentioning into use and engaged with your kids.
I feel like I had a good moment recently. You know, my older daughter knows about phones, and I have to be careful about having my phone out. And so my phone was out, and shame on me when I was with her. And so instead of um, putting it away and trying to distract, I actually use the phone for a better purpose, and that is to record them, interview them, and have
Yeah,
them interview each other. I have two daughters, so I had one daughter interview the other daughter. I interviewed my oldest, and my youngest interviewed my oldest, right? And we sort of had a game of recording each other, just
yeah,
asking um, my youngest, who's 4.5, like simple questions and just hearing her funny answers, and then sometimes more provocative questions too.
yeah,
And it it is kind of a way of marking that time in history. It's a way of uh, like documenting your life that I think is just different. It's a use of the phone that I think is much more productive and nourishing than just like playing games or
yeah.
so I was very proud because I think there's a power to a good interview, as
Hmm.
you very well know.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
and I think you could do that with your kids. Kids love interviewing each other
yeah,
and love being interviewed.
yeah, yeah. Well, I love that. Yeah, we whenever I am on my phone with my girls, and if it's a social media time, like we really just use like Instagram and other things to look up recipes. And so we are almost using it more as like a reference guide
Yeah,
than a social media kind of place. And they love it. Like they love seeing how really good cooks, quote unquote, do something. And then, we try and fail miserably sometimes, but it still
yeah,
tastes good, even if it doesn't look good. So, yeah,
I hear you.
but I've not thought about doing an interview. So I love that. Yeah, maybe we'll do a little internal podcasting of
Yes,
the family. Yes.
right in
Uh,
your wheelhouse, man. Right in
yeah,
your wheelhouse.
right. Well, Jett, it's been awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you for being on the show. Those of you who are listening, thanks for tuning in. Let's let's end with your dad joke to head us into the weekend. So lay it on us, Jett. What
Okay.
is
Let me preface it by saying I'm not a dad joke guy, and I like my jokes more spontaneous. But here's one for you. What is brown and sticky?
I don't know. I'll keep it PG. I don't know. What is it?
A stick. All right,
Yes.
there you go.
Classic. Thank
Super
you.
lame.
Classic
Super
one.
lame.
Well, everyone, there you have it. Use it on your kids this weekend. Have a blessed weekend, and we will see you all next week for another episode. Peace. Bye.
Thanks, Brian. Bye.